I studied zoology at university about 12 years ago or so, and I'd known at university that I wanted to be a photographer, but didn't really have a clue how to be a photographer. I knew that I wanted to travel quite far away, and it was documentary photography and the work of documentary photographers that really interested me. And it was sort of coincidence that I had a couple of friends that have volunteered at a leprosy hospital in Nepal. And it was very easy getting in touch with them to get in touch with the charity that helped coordinate their visit, and I did the same for me. And went out to this hospital, Laogad, which is in the southern sort of flatter part of Nepal, and I spent 6 weeks, I think, at the hospital, and spoke to lots of staff, spoke to lots of patients. And quite crucially spoke to this man called Dr. Hugh Cross, who is a podiatrist. He's had lived in Nepal for a long time, lived in the Philippines before that, and worked in leprosy for 30, 40 years. And I had long conversations with him in the evening that sort of persuaded me that instead of just doing a small 6-week project on leprosy at this hospital, to maybe do something a bit longer term. So he persuaded me maybe I could go to a couple more countries. So I came back to the UK, and I can't remember, I was doing like pub work or worked at my old school in maintenance or something. I earned up enough and went traveling elsewhere. And I thought maybe I can do this for a couple more years. And then sort of long story short, I was working for another charity in Togo, or volunteering for them, and found heard of a leprosy colony up north, went up there for just 3 or 4 days, did a blog about that was picked up by American leprosy missions, and since then they employed me to go places. So and then I started doing more work for them, and then they actually sent me around several countries over about a period of a year and a half, and I started getting in touch with other organizations, and that's basically how I got into leprosy. And I've been interested in doing other work since, but working for leprosy NGOs as a freelancer has been my main income and my main sort of interest. And now I've got other projects to do with prisons, LGBT rights, stone miners, all sorts of things. I think my main focus is, and I think probably always will be, leprosy quite specifically. I've photographed other neglected tropical diseases as well, but leprosy is something that it's been 12 years now, and 13, 14 countries, something like that. I think there is value, in showing people, interviewing them and distilling that a bit so that they're manageable bites, for people to learn about who they are, to hopefully make in some way, although it's very imperfect, tangible connections with people from very different backgrounds. I think that's generally true of what media can do, photography, video can do. I think recording for the sake of history is very important. I'm quite conscious that I've built up a very large archive that I don't think, I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think anyone has done before. Though it's very much from one person, which is not necessarily a good thing. It's I think there's value in having a large concentration of history of this sort, of this time being recorded, because leprosy it's not as big a deal as it was 30 years ago in terms of numbers of people affected, and the amount of people that know what to do with it, but know how to deal with it. But it's still a problem that's out there, and these individual stories still matter. And more so maybe now in this globalized world where it's very easy for people to travel quickly to countries. People visit India, certainly from the West, we visit somewhere like India, which has the majority of new cases of leprosy in the world, far more frequently than we've ever done, and that's probably only going to increase. I think on that note, I think more and more, however, I'm leaning towards collaborative ways of working. I think we're certainly aware, and there's, for example, the Black Lives Matter post George Floyd movement last year has cemented even further the power imbalances that lie in the world. In that case, with black people, white people, but generally, as a white Brit traveling abroad to countries that were mainly formerly colonized, where there's still power imbalance, I'm conscious that why should it be me telling these stories, and at the same time wrestling with the fact that I'm quite invested in this, and I have I'm hesitant to say expertise, but a lot of experience with what leprosy is, and in some cases personal relationships with people affected by leprosy. So yeah, I think there is still power in the sort of archive that I've built up, but I'm still working out how to manage that. And we got in touch via my Instagram site, is Leprosy, trying to understand this back catalogue I've got and still see value that's there, even if these power imbalances are imperfect. There's been so many specific stories that have stood out, but I met a young woman. She's we're not entirely sure, but about my age, maybe a bit. I'm 35, and I think Tanya is 34. And I met her. She lives in Dhaka in Bangladesh. While I was on commission for Affect Hope, the Canadian leprosy mission, and that was in 2017. And she struck me. She was a very easy person to interview in many ways. She was very friendly. We're a similar age. She's married, and at the time she had a daughter, a 4-year-old daughter. And I do lots of work in Bangladesh. I'd actually 2 years before that gone there to study photography. I'd never studied before. I was self-taught, and then decided I need to go on a more formal course, and studied at a school in Bangladesh. And so I was going back there quite regularly for other work as well, other projects, personal projects mainly, and decided see if she wouldn't mind me videoing her life and doing long interviews with her, and sort of photographing and videoing her over time. And she was more than happy to agree to that. And it's been the thing that's been so special about it. And we're in touch regularly, every 2 or 4 weeks via another friend in Bangladesh who helps translate. We have video chats, and so for the first 2-3 years I visited her relatively often, and then since then I've actually been in touch even more because we've been videoing, and so it's given me this. It's given each other an insight into our lives, which might otherwise not happen when, even if you're visiting someone for 4 hours, 4 hours is very little time. For two weeks or even 6 weeks, like I first did, it's still not very much time to get to know someone. But over this great period of time, I'm seeing all of these complex relationships that she has with her family, with the Leprosy NGO out there that helps her, which can be both a good thing and a troubled thing when she gets frustrated that they're not doing enough. Just to put it into context, so Tanya when I met her, was in her late 20s. and had 2 amputations below the knee, and what's called absorption in her hands, where her hands are numb, so she can't feel any pain. It's the same with her legs, which is one of the side effects of leprosy system, which means that you can't feel anything. And so she's got real damage there. Every time she cuts herself, she can't really feel it. So she's cooking, which she does regularly. Then she burns herself. Then it's not as painful. And so you use your hands normally, and it takes long to heal or doesn't heal. And so she's got very short fingers. And so because of that, because of being a double amputee, it's a really tough life for her. And she now has 2 children as well. We talk a lot about, she talks to me about her, the various things and thoughts that she goes on, dreams she has, and frustrations. And it's been, it's one of the sort of relationships that I have that I'm most thankful for. And she's been very giving and very generous in letting her into my life, and I've tried to reciprocate that as much as she wants me to. So I mean, and to talk about her story, I mean, I think I've said sort of most of it. Generally, you can imagine it's just very difficult. But problems with where she lives, and her husband as well is affected by leprosy, and he's got an ulcer that recurs on his foot, and worked as a rickshaw driver, and I met him, but then had to stop working doing that. He was working in a factory and then got let go towards the end of in the last few months because of business closing because of the pandemic. But it's always a struggle for him as well, because he relies on people being generous, because he can't work as readily and hard as people that don't have a recurring ulcer on their foot. And so there's tensions there that Tanya talks about. And I think it's that knowing her now for more than 4 years, it's I've got an insight into her life that I've never had before. I think, I think there's something in the biological nature of the disease that probably means it's going to be very hard to eliminate. Certainly by 2030, it sort of disappeared in Europe with as general other conditions improved, water, sanitation, hygiene, as you know, in the 20th century, as that improved, we saw leprosy die out. And I think one of the things that initially first interested me about leprosy was it seemed to be tied to inextricably with what poverty means in the world today, and when there's lack of water, clean water, sanitation, hygiene, etc. So I think though I'm hesitant to say it, partly because I work freelance for a lot of NGOs and organisations that are aiming for that goal of leprosy elimination by 2030. I think it's probably unlikely. I think, having said that, these big pushes can sometimes be very helpful for progressing innovation, or generally making sure that support is there, and that things like national health systems incorporate the expertise to deal with leprosy and other neglected tropical diseases. I probably don't think it will, but the situation is so much better than it was 30 years ago. And it's interesting, I've been lucky enough to travel to some countries where that network of leprosy support in the health system has been disrupted. 2 examples are Liberia and the Republic of Congo. both because of civil war. And so visiting more remote parts, you see people that have got leprosy that in their 20s and 30s, that are the sorts of things you expected at old leprosy colonies with people that are in their 70s that got most of the late effects of leprosy long before the multi-drug therapy was a thing, which was the mid 80s. So yeah, it needs these concerted efforts to keep down and make sure that those affected by leprosy can have manageable lives. I think to eliminate it completely, an elimination, I should probably say this thing. The other thing about the word eliminate organization definition is fewer than 1 in 10,000 people in a population having it. So technically, if India, what's their population, 1.1 billion or something, got below 100,000 cases, then it would be eliminated. And they declared it eliminated in 2005. So maybe the elimination by that account is possible, but in terms of how we think about it as a general layman's term, eradication, I don't think that's going to happen.